This year saw some of the most crucial political moments in modern YDSA history. It's the responsibility of the NCC and the co-chairs as political leaders to respond to these events as they arise. How would you lead in times of crisis, and how can national YDSA specifically respond better to these moments in future?
I will say the NCC's response to Palestine this semester was slow going. And the big problem with that is that there was not a committee that was able and ready to take on the work of that we really required for Palestine. What I really want to focus on as co-chair is our functional committees in YDSA National. We should be able to have committees for different areas of work that are applicable to any campaign that we may see that develops in political moments, providing YDSA members with the appropriate skills and training that they need to meet the political moment.
This question really emphasizes the need for national leaders who are like flexible and adaptable and ready to meet the moment, whatever happens. So to me, this means like not over bureaucratizing the system on a national level and not like over structuring our organizing. Because like, of course, structure is necessary. Like trainings are good and committees are good. But I really think that like what chapters really need is sustained mentorship that's really flexible and adaptable.
I think having clear function-based committees where buckets of work can be delegated to and having that bureaucracy be refined and complementary to member organizing.
This year, YDSA has worked with many organizations in official and unofficial capacities. Large labor unions like Starbucks Workers United, and less officially the United Auto Workers, have been deeply involved in our campaigns. Meanwhile, the tenuous relationship with Palestinian mass organizations, such as SJP and PYM, has improved but not been fully overhauled. How should YDSA connect with other organizations in the next year? What organizations are your priority, and how would you develop those relationships as co-chair?
I can very much speak to experience on this topic. In the creation of the Tucker Coalition, that is a result of our YDSA chapter. And I must mention specifically, like, at the direction and led by Comrades of Color, set out and work for an entire year on building an extremely intentional and productive relationship with our SJP chapter. And that led us to being one of the first orgs that they contacted on October 8th because they knew we were reliable and we were going to show up, and they knew that we knew what we were doing and we were going to support them unequivocally.
Sure. I think I have a little bit of a different perspective. I believe that we, as YDSA, must always lead in these coalitions with our theory of change, which is organizing the masses with discipline and democratic structures, because that's the most effective way to win tangible things and create lifelong socialist leaders, right? This isn't in total contrast to coalition building as a method, but it's like a slightly different approach, I think. Recently, I've been realizing that we must focus on bottom up organizing and movement organizing instead of top down. So what I mean by that is like we shouldn't just focus on talking to the leaders of each organization in a coalition for divestment or what have you on campus, but actually like building a base of support in the like rank and file per se of each organization. This is how we get students to feel agency over the movement and agency over the really hard organizing tasks that they're doing. That's, I think, how we both develop new leaders in the multiracial working class through this struggle, and also how we like really bring the admin to its knees.
I think we do need to prioritize coalitions with labor unions that especially are trending towards progressive politics. And we do need to engage with these grassroots Palestinian mass organizations. That's where workers are. That's where students are. And we need to be doing so in a way that maintains the core of our socialist identity and theory of change, while not stepping on the toes of the workers and students who are doing the organizing bottom up.
I take coalition work very, very seriously. After 4 years of work, I co-founded a student coalition on my campus, which let me tell you was not easy. But as YDSA coordinator, I watched chapters deteriorate as a result of catering to other groups, sidelining themselves into one-sided coalitions and really neglecting their chapter's health. And I just want to be clear, you should listen to diverse voices, absolutely. But we do have a principled role as socialists to promote mass independent action on our campuses and not bow down to the whims of what other orgs want, okay? And I have a good example of this, all right? There was a coalition meeting this past semester where my YDSA was discussing actions with our SJP. One side of the SJP were more liberals focusing on closed door meetings with the student government campus president. On the other hand, there were the ultras who wanted to do this big boisterous march where they get access to the top of campus buildings and pour red paint everywhere. And my incoming chapter co-chair, Madawa, who I think is just a brilliant organizer, she comes in and just plainly asks the question, like, who's going to pick up the paint? Like, who's going to clean that up? It's going to be the janitors. It's going to be the working class, the people who we've spent the past 4 years organically building a relationship with. It's not going to be the campus bureaucrats. And that's because these individuals and these other orgs, they just don't see workers as agents of change. And honestly, I don't think people with autonomy, which I think is a damn shame. So as socialist organizers, I think we should prioritize organizing the student body over relationship building with a handful of niche activist leaders.
I think that we really build these relationships with other organizations by proving ourselves as sort of really good organizers and activists in the movement. We bring more people towards our theory of change, towards our organizing model, and then bring them into YDSA by proving that our theory of change and our organizing model is effective.
I feel like my words may have gotten a bit misconstrued. I did not say uncritically support all Palestinian organizers. We still need a distinct YDSA characteristic. And what I more meant is that, again, like, this is something that my YDSA chapter has successfully done within Tahrir. We have orientated ourselves as the organization that knows how to organize within the intersections and the contradictions of our campus environment, no matter the issue. We've been one of the orgs that has kind of led internally and externally, connecting Palestine to queer issues, as well as working with other similar tendency groups and slowly building our own YDSA chapter and our own membership and our own ability. In addition to that, our YDSA chapter has directly influenced our coalition, making it more democratic and shifting the theory of change to be more in line with that of YDSAs. Everything that you guys are describing is absolutely possible because it has happened on this small scale level. There's a blueprint to doing it. It exists.
One of the largest fights the co-chairs have taken on in recent memory has been our involvement in the 2023 to 2024 budget crisis. The ultimate resolution to the DSA budget saw over $1 million of cuts across the organization, including YDSA, committee budgets, and a reduction of DSA staff from approximately 30 positions to 20 positions. What should YDSA's budget look like specifically, and how would you organize for that vision on DSA's highest decision-making body?
I think that a baseline idea is prioritizing any chapter grants that are going towards specifically membership, recruitment, and retention. Because how else are we supposed to get more dues-paying members into YDSA?
Yeah, I will definitely say that the YDSA budget is important. What does the YDSA budget look like in the next year? The one we democratically passed at DSA convention. And the way that I'm going to fight for that is by leveraging the same relationships that I used to protect as much as I could of YDSA's budget this year. I definitely do want to prioritize within our budget, though, not just chapter grants and things like that, but the paid political leadership that has transformed our national organization over the past year, expanding that program to committee co-chairs once again with expanded stipends. I think that the stipends for committee co-chairs this past year were not enough, and they need to be larger in order to facilitate committee co-chairs taking on a larger share of work. In order to do that, we don't run away. We don't just separate ourselves. We have to fight for these things on the NPC. We have to show that YDSA is in this strategic socialist political project that is DSA for the long haul.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the tension around this that happened was that like YDSA makes up a disproportionate amount of the budget for like how large we are. So the question then kind of becomes, are students strategic enough to organize to warrant that kind of budget? What kind of leverage do we even have with like this turnover rate of like 100% in 4 years or whatever? But I argue that we are worth it. Actually, like it's our job as young socialists to intercept people at like this pivotal point in their lives and give them the tools to be lifelong organizers. As I've already said, deliberately giving the resources for organizing on public school campuses, on commuter campuses, on campuses with high POC students and high immigrant student rates, because we must build that base in a diverse working class, right? So this means fundamentally having democratic control over the YDSA budget, a healthy budget with paid political leaders. It means that the NCC and YDSA members must all unite and tell the NPC this is not only what we deserve, but this is actually the most strategic for the socialist movement.
YDSA is very strategic for DSA to invest in. And we wouldn't be running for co-chair if we didn't believe that YDSA is strategic. It is a strategic place for DSA to invest its funds into. But the best way for us to get more funding for YDSA is not to separate ourselves out or separate ourselves away from the NPC. We have been able to sustain our funding at the level that we currently have and not have it be cut more is because YDSA has proven itself to be strategic to DSA. And we are building lifelong socialist organizers, lifelong socialist cadre that are going to graduate from YDSA and come into DSA and be the real base of DSA to grow and continue to grow, and then have a better base of dues in order to fund projects in YDSA.
I believe that we should fund things based on strategic value. All right. Because we're doing some of the most dynamic work, not just in DSA, but I think the American Socialist Project in general. I mean, look at the CSU comrades at SF State experimenting with student unions, the brave organizers in Mizzou who managed to make their community a sanctuary city, groundbreaking militant UO comrades who achieved the biggest union drive, not just in YDSA, but DSA history. And then, of course, the recent Starbucks win, which I have on very good authority, was achieved in large part thanks to our amazing chapters. Okay, so that's why I think we should have earmarked fundraising. All right, there are folks who really believe in our project and who want their money to go to fund the future of the socialist movement. I hear the sentiment from a lot of naysayers that students aren't fronting the bill enough and stuff, and I really dislike that sentiment, if I'm being honest, because you shouldn't expect students to have a ton of disposable income. I know, crazy idea. Especially those from the working class backgrounds like myself. I think you should view it as a long-term investment to ensure that DSA has a healthy pipeline of socialist organizers for the foreseeable future. Okay, we should not have to rely on the name recognition of a popular politician to get membership dues numbers up. Okay, I would be clear about my perspective and fight like hell for it in lieu of cutting a deal like Aaron did for the YDSA budget and abstaining on the issue.
I definitely say NCC stipends or not. Do we think that's strategic? Is it worth fighting for? Is it worth fighting like hell for? Because that's what I did. I fought like hell for the NCC stipends. And if it meant that we had to lose committee co-chair stipends, and it meant keeping that core part of the YDSA budget that my predecessors, Jake and Lena, fought so hard for to pass on the NPC, I'd say it was worth it. I think everybody on this call, on this panel, understands that YDSA is the most strategic part of DSA, and that students are worth investing for beyond the amount of dues money that they put in. We have to be practical about these things. We can fight principled fights. We can advocate for YDSA beyond the budget and bring more resources to YDSA than just money. That's what I've done on the NPC. That's what I intend to continue to do. Beyond protecting the budget, I do have a plan for expanding it as well. I talked about committee co-chair stipends and the need to improve those and expand our program of paid political leadership, build more organizers. So I think, if we kept NCC stipends and were able to build institutional memory with that program, carry it into this next year, this crucial period where we can prove that the viability of NCC stipends exists beyond this term, I think that's worth it.
So Uma and I, come from labor backgrounds, right? It's fair to say that we like the idea of collective bargaining. It certainly influenced my negotiating style, but let's take a look at other ways that labor leaders negotiate. Okay, that's by putting pressure. And we did that back in Chicago during DSA convention. I remember we came together late at night and strategizing on our targets, going over talking points, and en masse went out and won on the convention floor. All right, we need more of that. We need to be able to rally the troops and let the NPC and other non-supportive types in DSA spaces know that our priorities really do matter. All right. We didn't win more resources for YDSA by deferring to the naysayers and begging, but by tough organizing. All right. And look, Uma and I'll say it, we can't do it alone. And I'll say that we won't put up barriers between us and the membership. We need all of you to help secure our budget.
Fundamentally, the problem with this framing is that we are still DSA members. We are in the same organization as DSA, and we cannot be fighting the NPC and DSA like they are the bosses, because they are not. We are a single movement organization, and what builds DSA builds YDSA, and what builds YDSA builds DSA. Fundamentally, for us to get more resources, get more strategic investment in YDSA is for us to prove ourselves organizing wise, prove that YDSA is strategic, to get more members into DSA and expand the pot of money that we have, because there is only a limited amount of funds, and there is so much work that YDSA does, but also so much work that DSA does that also needs funding and needs money. Fundamentally, we need to be able to work through our collective struggle without slandering DSA on the timeline.
I think this is a perfect example of the kind of subtle factional fights that underlie all of the decision making that is at the highest level. We all agree that YDSA is important. We all agree YDSA is strategic. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be as invested in this as we are right now. It is possible to both defer to the membership for democratic input on budget items while relentlessly advocating that the NPC pay attention to YDSA and take us seriously. We're in a budget crisis and we need to fucking act like it. We need to work together and not let little disputes get in the way. We have a little over a year, I believe, until the next DSA budget is going to be up for debate and passed. If we can work together and get our shit together before then we're able to have the big conversations about the YDSA budget in general. But we need to be in a surplus position before those conversations are going to have viable weight to them.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Good night, comrades.